Hi, I'm Matt Barry from ESPN. You're getting ready to watch one of the best college football podcasts ever. It's the Harris Highlights Show.
Na 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 na.
Coming to you live from downtown Phoenix, this is Season 2, Episode 12 of the Harris Highlights Show. Joining me this week are college football analyst Josh Schaefer and Lyle Goldstein with our executive producer Brady Klein. I'm your host for the evening, Blake Harris. Now guys, before we get into all that fun college football talk, this week's episode is once again brought to you by FanDuel. Sign up using the promo code SCORE2 and you'll get a free entry into the NFL Sunday $1 Million Contest, a chance to win $1 million with your first deposit. If you want a chance to be in this though, you gotta deposit. You can't go signing up and becoming a millionaire. I wish it was that easy, but sadly, it's not. Go ahead, deposit $5, maybe 10, who knows? Make sure you win that $1 million, and if you do win, spread some of that wealth with us because we all like money. But guys, welcome to this week. Now, we're going to start with the college football playoff rankings as we like to start doing once that starts coming out, and not a lot of changes in the top 5 this week. Actually, there were no changes in the top 5. The top 5 is the same exact as it was last week, so really quickly touch on that, guys. Do you think it should have stayed the exact same? Do you think there should have been some movement? What are your overall thoughts on the top 5 essentially staying the same?
I don't see any problems with the top 5. I think the teams in the top 4 even are fine. I think Oklahoma, maybe you could make an argument for them to be in there. We'll get to our top 4 later. I'm still not super sold on Wisconsin as we continue to move them down the list. They moved up 2 spots for beating Indiana. Brady, no offense. I would have liked to see Miami move up. That's for darn sure. I would have liked to see them move up. And then looking back at pretty much everybody else, it's disappointing to see a few teams drop. But for the most part, I think the top 25 has it pretty much nailed. Ohio State dropped pretty far, and I like seeing both Michigan State and USC move up. But Michigan State moving up 12 spots, is that a lot? Maybe. I think it's also warranted as well.
I mean, just sticking to the top 4, I think they got it right. I know I was a little paranoid over the weekend thinking Notre Dame only won their game by 11 at Wake Forest. I thought there was a chance they could drop maybe 2 spots all the way to 5, but when you look at it, they still only had 1 loss, and it was by 1 point to the number 1 team in the country in Georgia. You look at Oklahoma at 5, though. Sure, they're at 5. They had a very impressive win over an Oklahoma State team that's very good on the road for Bedlam. But that Oklahoma defense, man, I think that defense is a huge problem. 52 points. I know Mason Rudolph in that offense is high-powered and explosive, but still, in my opinion, Oklahoma gets into the top 4. They play any of those teams currently in the top 4 right now, and I think they get exposed big time. So do I agree with them being at 5 for now? Yeah, I do. And I think the top 4 is nailed right on the head, and they got it right. But I'm interested to see how the rest of this year is going to play out because Oklahoma, I'm not sold on them.
Yeah, the top 4 is really set in stone, and it was last week, same thing this week, Georgia, Bama, Notre Dame, and Clemson. But like Lyle said, that Oklahoma game, they put up, 55 points?
They put up 62, and they let up 52.
That's the thing, though. Yes, you put up 62, but you let up 50-something points, and I guess your quarterback throws for 600 yards, and so be it. But this Oklahoma team, yes, they played against a very good Oklahoma State team. Great game, but you got to look at the defensive side of things. Everyone's focused on Baker Mayfield on the offense, but when you switch over, your defense lets up 55 points or 52 points. It's not going to end well for your team in the end of the season if your defense can't play as well as your offense can.
I'm overall okay with the top 5 staying essentially the same. We're going to get more into that when we do give our own personal top 4s. We'll kind of expand on why we think certain teams should be somewhere, but I kind of want to dive down a little deeper, and that's in that 6 to 10 range. And the first question I have is, first off, I want to tip my hat right now, and I'm actually going to do it to the U of Miami. I was not, well, granted, none of us were high on them coming into this week. You guys picked them last week. I didn't. And they came to play against Virginia Tech. I still thought Virginia Tech was one of the best teams in the ACC. And that was all Miami's game. The turnover chain was on proud display for most of that game. And Miami, wow, what a performance. They're at 7 right now. They move up 3 spots from 10, but they're still undefeated. They're still 8-0. Now, granted, I remember I was watching with Lyle earlier, and some of the games they've had this year have been ugly wins. There's been about 3 or 4 just straight ugly wins. But you can't ignore the fact they are undefeated. I think they should have leapfrogged, no pun there, over the TCU Horned Frogs, who did beat Texas by 17. It's going to be interesting to see, though. If they do, we'll get into the Miami-Notre Dame game this week, but that's the one I want to touch up on. And another one is Wisconsin at 8. They did move up 1 spot after a nice win over Indiana, but they won 45-17. Lyle and I, we were watching that game as well, and that was not that much of a blowout. That was a close game for a majority of the game until late in the fourth quarter, Wisconsin pulled away. So don't let the score deceive you, but seeing Wisconsin there at 8, at 9-0, that's something very interesting as well. And my final one is Auburn moving up to 10. They move up 4 spots after beating Texas A&M by 2 touchdowns. So obviously the committee is very high on Auburn, unless they're trying to make that matchup this week against Georgia that much more interesting. But overall, I feel 6 through 10 is a lot more interesting than 1 through 5.
Well, I'll let BK touch on Wisconsin in a minute, but I'll stick to Miami. I know they only let up 10 points against a very good Virginia Tech team, and it was an impressive win. I'll give them that, but I'm still not sold on them at all. You look at their past schedule, they had 4 straight wins by less than a score. They beat Florida State by 4, Georgia Tech by 1, Syracuse 27-19, so by 8, and UNC 1-8 UNC by 5 points. I'm not sold on this team. And there's probably a little bias going into this, of course, being the fan that I am, but I think Notre Dame is on a whole nother level than Virginia Tech. So there's a very good chance they can make me eat my words this upcoming weekend. Maybe they prove me wrong, but I think this is Miami's test this upcoming weekend. But looking at their schedule so far, I'm still not sold. I really don't care that they're undefeated, to be totally honest. They have had some very, very unimpressive wins.
Touching back on Wisconsin for a second, though, they've played 1 game all season long against a BPI top 50 team. Ooh. And that was this past week against Indiana, when Indiana was ranked 48th. So Indiana was the hardest opponent that Wisconsin's faced all season long. I'm not sold on the Badgers whatsoever, and I don't think there is a very good playoff chance that this Badger team goes into the playoffs. Hell, maybe even the Big Ten is going to be left out of the playoffs. Things can change. Things have changed, but you never know. The Big Ten playoff picture goes through Madison, but it doesn't look very good for this Badgers team.
And the tough thing for Wisconsin is, I mean, it was the one thing how they did have a chance if they go undefeated and they meet, like an Ohio State or a Penn State in that Big Ten title game. But right now, guys, with, Ohio State and Penn State, they're both going down. If Wisconsin does get a win over them in that Big Ten title game, is it going to be as impressive?
Well, I'm going to keep it short. To be totally honest, maybe this is a little bit of a spoiler into the pick'ems, but I think Iowa takes it from them this weekend. I think Iowa's a good team. After what I saw against Ohio State, those guys are for real. You got to remember, they were a play away from beating Penn State, who I know has lost 2 in a row now, but is still a good team. I think Iowa's legit. They might not be a top 10 team, but I think they're going to expose Wisconsin.
Now, going down the list right here, right away, Michigan State, they move up 12, which is, for the AP poll, that seems almost unheard of. But in the college football playoff poll, 12 spots, they moved from 24 to 12. I mean, granted, they did beat Penn State. They beat them by 3 points. So, guys, really quickly, and I mean, this was a game that took about 7 or 8 hours or so because of that, 4-hour weather delay. But, guys, do you think Michigan State deserved to jump up 12 spots for a 3-point victory?
12 spots is a lot. I don't agree that they should have hopped up 12 spots. However, I do like that they moved up quite a bit. I think it's absurd that they're now ranked ahead of Ohio State entering this week's game. So I think that is a bit generous. I'll hold off on my pick. I think this Ohio State-Michigan State game is definitely one to watch for this Saturday. But I'm happy Michigan State it's a 360 it's a 180 from last year. Because math. It's a 180 from last year. They were awful last year, and they've done a really good job this year of getting their program back on track, and I think they make it to a solid bowl game. But right now, 12 spots is quite a bit.
It's funny how much last year on this show we talked about how poorly both Notre Dame and Michigan State were playing, and we had a lot of skeptical, I should say, on whether either of these programs will be able to turn it around, and they've both done a great job of it. You look at Michigan State. Do I think they should move up 12 spots for a 3-point win? No, especially against a Penn State team that's starting to slide, like I said earlier. But you look back at their schedule, they've had some good wins. They beat Iowa. They beat Michigan, who I know is a borderline team in the top 25. Minnesota, who's respectable, they beat them by 3. And then Indiana, again, another kind of middle-of-the-pack Big Ten team, won by 8. One of their 2 losses against Notre Dame and in an overtime game against Northwestern, who's now ranked. So Michigan State up to 12 spots for a 3-point win. I think that's a little much, but they're a more impressive team than some people might look at them to be.
Now, something else that caught my eye is Penn State and Ohio State both falling 7 spots. Ohio State, in my opinion, deservingly so, because they lost by 30 points in a game that was just ugly. But Penn State falling seven spots for losing at Michigan State by 3 points. So really quickly, why do you think they both fell 7 spots when both of their losses were completely different? Penn State, they were in that game for the most part the entire way, as I mentioned, by 3, when you got an Ohio State team that obviously were outplayed by a ton. And I wish I would have made my pick for the Pick'ems Iowa, because I said last week Iowa is one of the toughest places to play, but since it was a day game, I did give them the edge. But do you think maybe that Penn State should be ranked higher just because their loss wasn't as bad?
I'm going to say yeah. Ohio State, I agree with them dropping 7 spots. That loss was embarrassing. But you look at Penn State, I know they've lost 2 in a row, but their 2 losses, 1 point against Ohio State and by 3 points against Michigan State, both on the road too. So I would have dropped Penn State maybe 2 or 3 spots, but they gave them a hard punishment for these last 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think that these last 2 weeks, I think it's deserving for Penn State, to be totally honest. I mean, you dropped 2 in a row, of course, both of them pretty good teams. But I think it's the way that they lost their last 2 games, which is dropping them so far. I mean, we all talked last week. Early in this Ohio State game for the Nittany Lions, we had talked about if we were considering turning the game off because this game looked like it was going to get ugly. When you blow games like that in that fashion, like you did against Ohio State, and then you have a follow-up loss where everyone thought that you were going to bounce back and kick some butt. These are 2 bad losses in a row. Whether or not they were against good teams or not, I think they're both bad losses for Penn State. However, James Franklin instantly became my favorite coach in college football for what he did after the game. Did you see that? You didn't see that, Blake? Did you see that, Lyle?
Yeah, I saw it.
Yeah,
cool.
He chased down he chased down players who were walking off the field and made them go back out and shake hands with the other team.
But going back to what you said, Josh, the 2 losses that they had, in the manner in which they lost them, I don't think they should have been dropped, 7 spots? But what the playoff committee looks at is the clutch factor, is how I'm going to describe it, is when this scenario comes into play, if you're on a last-minute drive, if you're on a 2-minute drill, 4-minute drill, if you have a good stand on defense, if you had a game-winning field goal, something like that, the clutch factor in a game, that's something they take account for as well. So Penn State, yes, they only lost by 1 point and 4 points, I think it was. They didn't come through when they needed it most. So that's where the committee was looking at them saying, well, they didn't perform at the time they absolutely needed to. So that's why they got dropped 7 spots.
Well, looking at this poll, something the committee is very high on is the Pac-12. Because all of a sudden, USC hops up 6 spots. Washington hops up 3 spots. We kind of pretty much last week counted the Pac-12 out of a playoff push because they were just ranked so low. But now you got Washington at 9, USC at 11, and we got some top 10 matchups this week. So we're going to have some teams that are slipping. So all of a sudden, Washington, USC going into next week, they can both be in the top 9, maybe even top 8, both teams. And with a chance to play each other, in the Pac-12 title game, all of a sudden now there's a little gleam of hope for USC and Washington to possibly make a playoff push.
Can we touch on Washington for a second? Because this is a team I was so high on last season. When you look down their schedule, have they really had an impressive win?
Played anyone?
To be honest, UW, I'd have, 9 is where I would have the University of Washington if they were undefeated right now. I don't think they should be ranked 9th with a 1 loss against Arizona State with the schedule they've had.
Where would you put them, Lyle?
I'd probably put them around 13, to be honest, 14 maybe.
So still in the top half.
Well, sure. I mean, they're what, 8-1. They should be top 15, but their schedule has not been impressive.
I mean, the schedule is going to get a little harder, and they do have to travel to Palo Alto this week. They do play Stanford, and then after that, they do have a Washington State team as well. they do have tough games remaining, especially if they do have to play USC in that Pac-12 title game. But as you mentioned, with their current resume is what it is, it's going to be tough for them to move up. I think if anyone has a better chance, it might be USC.
Yeah, and I think so too, and I think that's something that I'll touch on later when we get to our pick'ems. But bottom line, looking at UW, I can compare them with another UW school. I think Washington and Wisconsin are two very similar teams from top to bottom.
I was very confused on where you were going with that, Josh.
I just think that the Huskies have a better offense. They have more offensive weapons, but their offense, puts up better numbers than Wisconsin's, but for the most part, I think these two teams, the way that their schedules are built, the way that they've performed throughout the season, they're very similar.
And now, really quick question for you guys is, if Washington and Wisconsin were to play each other this weekend, who do you think would win?
I think the Huskies would win, but barely, to be honest. I think both teams are very similar, like Josh just said. I think it would be a defensive game. I think you'd see a 13-10 type of game because neither of the offenses are that explosive. I'd take the Huskies, though. I'd take UW.
Yeah, I agree. I would take the Huskies. I would think more of a maybe 21-17 game. I think we wouldn't see a touchdown scored until potentially the late second quarter.
I think it would come down to the special teams, and that sounds really weird to say, but when you look at UW special teams, they have the best special teams player in the country in Dante Pettis. So you kick the ball to him, it's a flight risk. You don't want to do that.
Unless if listen, UW fan, anyone that's playing UW this year, if you're trying to stop Dante Pettis, find him before the game and just scream Dante at him. Do that, and he's not going to be existent for the entire game. Trust us, it works. But going down the list, guys, really quickly, some of these other teams. Mississippi State at 16, one of which we thought was too high last week. They beat UMass by 11. But they were, first of all, they were losing in this game. Secondly, in the fourth quarter, they were only up by like 5 points or so. It was a one-possession game, and then UMass kind of blew it at the very end, but they're not moving at all. And here's one, right? It's going to be the same thing as last year with Western Michigan, and that is Central Florida. They got to win at SMU, a team which I was high on last week. They don't move at all. They're still 8-0 on the season. What's the deal here? Are they going to move up at all this year, or is it just because they're Central Florida?
I don't think they're going to move up a whole lot, and it's because of the level of competition that they play against. I think they're a good team. Of course, we're not really going to be able to see that tested out until the end of the season if they continue their winning ways, which they do have Temple, who could be a little bit of a trap game for them, and then they do have USF coming up at the end of the year for their final game, and I think that'll be a very interesting game, and that'll probably be the one game that in the American Conference where they're the American, where I would not even consider watching, and now it is because I like the way that both teams look going into that game. But I've been seeing some bold projections have been coming out from different outlets, and I see them on two different sites, two very quality sports news sites that have them in New Year's Six Bowls, being last year's Western Michigan, and I like it. I just think that they will have a lot of trouble competing with teams at a higher level.
I think they can definitely make a New Year's Six Bowl and kind of be a reincarnation of last year's Western Michigan team. I think it's just going to be harder for them to move up because if you have a team like Washington State or Iowa or somebody like that win, you're going to want to reward them and move them up, and that's going to leave UCF in the dust because despite whether they win or not, their opponents are not that tough. A win for UCF against UConn is not a more impressive win than Iowa against if they beat Wisconsin per se. So I think Iowa's going to get the benefit of the doubt for that, which is why it's going to make it harder for Central Florida to move up significantly throughout the year. Now, I do think they could get up to 15 or 16, but I don't think it's going to be much more than that.
I just want to touch up on Central Florida really quickly. They do have a win against Memphis this year, who's currently ranked 22 in the polls. They do have a win against Navy, who was ranked just about a few weeks ago. They got a win at Maryland by essentially 30 points, and they got some wins here against SMU, Cincinnati. So you look at this list, and they're not playing cupcake teams. Like, they're playing somewhat good teams, especially like this Memphis win. I mean, they have more wins over top 25 teams than Washington does this year. So I'm not saying they're better than Washington, but I do think UCF, although they are a non-Power 5 school, they deserve a little more recognition. I mean, move them up 1 or 2 spots. Don't have them not budge at all.
I'll say this. If somehow UCF and Washington were to play in a New Year's Six Bowl, I might be tempted to take the Knights in that game. I'm not going to lie.
I have a question for you guys about a team that's currently sitting 20th. That's Iowa. This past week, really put an embarrassing stamp on Ohio State. This upcoming week, they play at Wisconsin. If Iowa can win 2 top 10 ranked games in a row, where does that push them up at the best team in the Big Ten? Because Michigan State's playing the best in the Big Ten right now. But where does this put Iowa in the best?
Maybe you put them at 2, but you look at it, the fact is they have lost 3 games. Now, given those 3 losses have been to good teams, but considering they lost to Penn State and Michigan State, I don't think you can propel them above either of those teams. I probably have them as the 3rd best team.
All I have to say is we're going to have to wait and see because a lot of things still can happen this weekend where rankings can be completely changed. I mean, this is a huge week, not only for college football, but for the Big Ten as a conference in a whole. And really quickly, before we round out this top 25, I just want to say I might have been a little wrong on Iowa State, guys. They did not look good against West Virginia. They did lose by 4, but they were down, I think, 20-0 in that game, and they had a nice little comeback near the end. But Iowa State, you're not a top 10 team like I was making it out to be, and I hate to see it because I was right on you guys, but, stranger things have happened, and, some teams aren't who we thought they were. But, guys, overall, I thought this was a very impressive top 25. See Northwestern come in there at 25. They came out of nowhere, but they've had some impressive wins this year.
Well, remember, they beat Michigan State in overtime, so I think Michigan State going up 12 spots really helped Northwestern.
But yeah, that was this week's top 25 poll. A lot of changes, but oh man, next week. If you thought this week was going to be the week of changes, wait till next week. We have 3 top 10 matches. I think we have 6 or 7 just top 25 matches in itself. So a lot can happen this week. But guys, we're going to move in to our own personal top 4. I know you guys probably had a lot of fun with this. Now, I remember last year, whenever we do this, you guys, before the show would start, would look at my answers and choose the same 4 as me. So I'm going to take my 4.
I don't think we ever did that.
You guys,
that never happened.
And you guys
once.
Are going to do your top 4.
That definitely never happened.
All right, so here we go, right into my top 4. Not a whole lot of shakeup from the actual college football playoff rankings right now. So at number 1, I do have Georgia. I still like them over Alabama. Alabama, they're Bama. They're 9-0. Good for them. They beat LSU last week. Honestly, nothing new with these guys. Georgia, I just think, has played a higher level of opponents so far this season. So as of right now, I'm still a fan of Georgia at the number 1 spot. So I do have Georgia. I have Bama. I have Clemson moving to 3. They had the win over NC State. I like how they've really gotten their season back on track ever since they lost to Syracuse, and I think that was more of a Syracuse win than it was a Clemson loss at this point. So I'm still pretty high on Clemson. And now, for my number 4, I actually have Oklahoma. Sorry, Lyle, I have Notre Dame dropping out. I think Oklahoma, despite the fact that they gave up a lot of points to Oklahoma State, again, this is the Bedlam game. These are the 2 best offenses in the Big 12 Conference. There's no defense in the Big 12 Conference. I don't care how many points they gave up. It's the fact that they scored more in this one. Defense wins games, not in the Big 12. Baker Mayfield has propelled himself to potentially the front runner in the Heisman right now, and I'm all for Oklahoma at number 4.
See, Josh's top 4 is what I was fearing throughout this weekend. I was fearing Oklahoma jumping up to 4 because of their big win and Notre Dame dropping. Again, an 11-point win over Wake Forest isn't fantastic, but the fact is, I guess they still haven't lost and the committee didn't hurt them for that. I know this is boring and cliche. My top 4 is actually the same as ESPN's, as the committee's, but... And there's the... Man, the crowd's not a fan, are they? Well, anyway, like Josh said, Georgia's been the most impressive team in the country. They've had some really impressive wins, of course, going up to South Bend and winning, blowing all the rest of their opponents out of the water. I still have Alabama at 2. I got to tell you, though, touching on Bama for a minute, they're about to get haunted by some injuries because they lost their starting linebacker, their stud linebacker, Sean Dion Hamilton, for the season. That's going to be huge. Minka Fitzpatrick, who you can make an argument is the best defensive player in the country, he's now banged up. And if you don't have him, that's a whole different defense. I know Alabama has a whole ton of 5-star recruits sitting on the bench waiting to get in, but still, somebody like that is irreplaceable. Him and Rashawn Evans are their 2 go-to guys, and if one of those guys isn't healthy, I'm telling you, this Bama defense is going to look different. Notre Dame's still at 3. Again, touched on the Wake Forest game. However, their resume and their track record has looked nothing but great. They have wins over USC, who's now 11, Michigan State, who's 12, NC State, who's still a top 25 team. I think they've done just about all you could ask them to do. And then Clemson at 4. Kirk Herbstreit was talking about this today on the show. He still thinks Clemson is overall the best team in the country when healthy. I think Clemson, there's no reason that they shouldn't win out and give Georgia a run for their money if it is those two that match up in the first round of the playoffs. So I like the top 4 for now. Oklahoma, again, I know Josh said defense doesn't win games in the Big 12, but defense is going to win you games if you want to compete in the college football playoff, and all 4 of those defenses are just notches above Oklahoma's.
Defense wins championships, Lyle. Any sport, any competition level, defense wins championships.
Yes, it does.
Big 12 championship.
My top 4, I haven't been high on them. I'm in the way that everyone else is, but I'm putting Alabama at 1 just because it's Alabama. I know I haven't been high on them because they haven't played national games, they haven't done all this and that, but it's Alabama. I think I have to put them at 1 right now. I'm going to put Georgia at 2, but I'm more putting them at 1-B. But I think first place right now is a toss-up, and the winner of the SEC championship, I think we could end up seeing 2 ACC teams in the Final 4. I'm going to put Clemson at 3, and then just bump Notre Dame down to 4. I think Oklahoma's sitting right at 5th still, but I'm going to put Clemson there because, like what Josh said, they didn't. Syracuse didn't win the game. Clemson lost it. So one play goes wrong, one play goes right for each team. I think Clemson could still be undefeated and sitting at a higher record and a higher ranking. But that's why I'm going to put Clemson at what they are now and have Notre Dame at 4.
And now is when we have some fun, boys. I got the same exact 4 teams in my top 4, but it's going to be in a different order. Number 1, I am going to go with Georgia, just because they are undefeated. They have looked good this year. That win over Notre Dame now, at the time, didn't seem that big of a deal, but now it's looking like a massive win. At number 2, I'm going to go with Clemson, and this is why. I know they have that loss to Syracuse, which is still looking horrible. They have a win against number 10 Auburn. They have a win against number 17 Virginia Tech. And they have a win over number 23 NC State. Now, granted, all these teams were ranked higher when they played Clemson, and Clemson just looked fantastic over them. Kurt Herbstreit mentioned he still thinks Clemson is one of the top 4 teams in the country. And if we're going based off it, I think Clemson, without a doubt, is one of the 2 or maybe 3 best teams in the country. So if you want to go based off who the best teams are, you can't go thinking, okay, well, they were ranked 5th last week, I have to have them here. If you truly think they're the number 2 team in the country, you got to have them there. At number 3, I have Notre Dame. I honestly do. I think Notre Dame is one of the 3 best. That 1-point loss against Georgia, that's looking better and better by the week as well. And they had a convincing win against USC, a convincing win against NC State. Geez, they blew out USC and NC State more than they did Wake Forest, which is hard to believe. And then number 4, I am going to put Alabama, and I'm hesitant to even put them in number 4 because, like I said, if you look at Alabama's schedule, that Florida State win at the beginning of the year is not looking like a good one at all. And then you look at the rest of their lineup. Fresno State, Colorado State, Vanderbilt, Ole Miss, Arkansas, Tennessee, Texas A&M, that's a good one, I guess. And then this past week against LSU, that's a pretty good one because LSU is ranked. But let's all be real. LSU, I don't think they have any business being in the top 25 at all. I don't think they're one of the 25 best teams in the country without a doubt. So Alabama, like I said, they are undefeated. They are Bama. But if you look at just overall resume of who you've played and how you've performed against them, you can make a case that maybe like an Oklahoma, maybe even a TCU or Miami can potentially leapfrog them. Now, I know I might get some criticism for that, but I think Alabama is not overhyped because they probably talent-wise have one of the 2 best teams, but they've played nobody.
Well, I don't want you to take all the criticism, Blake, because I'm right with you on that. You look at Bama's schedule, you can honestly compare it to somebody like Washington's. It's a dud of a schedule. I know they have Auburn and Mississippi State coming up, but Mississippi State, I think they're maybe the most overhyped team in the country, especially that 11 through 25 range. And then we'll see with Auburn. I know they're the highest ranked 2-loss team in the country, but yeah, you look at Bama, again, watch for those injuries. I'm telling you that defense is going to start to look a little bit different, especially if Minkah Fitzpatrick can't play. But yeah, they haven't beaten anybody. I think the only reason they're up at 2, I know some people debate them at 1, but the only reason they're up at 2 is because of their year-by-year respect and the recognition they've earned over the past 6-7 years of notoriously being the number 1 team in the country. But when you just look at them this year, their wins are not that impressive, plain and simple.
Yeah, so we all got different top 4s, so that is exciting. You guys didn't copy off my notes this week, but hey, who knows about next week. But guys, I want to transition right now, and that is into the Heisman race, because for the longest time, we were all saying this is Saquon's to lose. I think it's safe to say he's officially lost it.
Yep.
So, guys, you can give me your top 2, your top 3, your top 4, your top 5, geez, your top 10. But let me know what your current Heisman rankings are as of right now.
So I'll get it started. So at number 1, I do have Baker Mayfield. Still not a huge fan. I think there are obvious aspects of his game that can be improved. But this week, I think he just outmatched my number 2 player in the Heisman running, which is Mason Rudolph. I have him at number 2. At number 3, I have Saquon, just because I simply think that he is one of the best running backs in college football. And this might be a long shot. But at number 4, very close behind Saquon Barkley, I have Ronald Jones. I have Ronald Jones at 4. And Ronald Jones these past few weeks has shown that he deserves to be in talks as one of the nation's most premier running backs. We all kind of agreed that he was one of the top 5 at the beginning of the season, behind players like Saquon and even Rashad Penny and Bryce Love. But these last few weeks, Ronald Jones has continued to go off. He's the first USC running back, I think, since Lendale White to have consecutive 1,000-yard rushing seasons, and they still have 3 games left to play. No, they have 2 games left to play, plus a potential Pac-12 championship if they win this week. And also, his statistics are better than Saquon's in every category. In every category, his stats are better than Saquon. So that's why it's a little bit of a stretch. Do I think he's going to win the Heisman? No. Is he going to get invited to New York? No. But this is also going back to kind of how I put Rashad Penny and Bryce Love in my top 4 for the Heisman a few weeks ago. I think he's a player who needs to be recognized, and I think if there was a less amount of good running backs in college football, he probably would be in the Heisman running anyway. So those are my top 4. Ow.
Well, I'm going to put Mayfield at number 1 after what he did against Oklahoma State. I think there's no denying, his greatness. He wanted to come back for 2 reasons: to win a title, and I think he didn't come out and say this, but to win a Heisman too. And so far, he's slingshot himself into that number 1 spot. I'll drop Saquon down to 2 for now. I know he's had 2 very, very mediocre weeks, to say the least, but he has one more good week, and all of a sudden people might start to turn their head again and think about, should he be moved back up to the front runner. I'll put Bryce Love at 3. I mean, you can't deny what the guy's done. I know Stanford hasn't been a great team, but you look at his numbers, 1,456 yards with 12 touchdowns. And at number 4, well, I'm going to stick to the guy from my own team who has over 100 yards more rushing than Ronald Jones on about 18 less carries, and that's Josh Adams, who, again, hasn't played a whole ton, especially over the last couple of weeks, partly because he sat out with some injuries, partly because they pull him out in the 4th quarter. He was in the concussion protocol after the 1st quarter against Wake Forest this past weekend. But what he's done is unreal. He's got more runs of 60-plus yards than anybody in the country, 9 touchdowns, almost 1,200 yards rushing. You leave him on the field for 60 minutes of football or whatever it is that the offense is out there, I think he'd even be higher. So, Adam, again, and of course there's some bias behind that. That's part of because I've watched him more than anybody else. But those are my top 4. Adams, do I think he's going to win it? No. I mean, with the way Baker, even Saquon have been playing. But I think he should get an invite to New York.
Damn, calling me out. So I'm just going to respond and say he might have 100 more yards, but he's got 4 less touchdowns.
My top 4 is going to be pretty, top 3 at least, is going to be pretty similar to all you guys. I'm going to have Baker Mayfield at number 1. Last week I said JT Barrett was jumping up, and I think the 4 interceptions caused him to fall even lower. So I'm going to go at number 2. I'm going to have Saquon Barkley sit there at 2. Number 3, I'm a big Bryce Love guy now. Ever since I watched him torch the Sun Devils, he set the record-breaking performance, beating Christian McCaffrey's record, knocking off the single-game yardage in Stanford history. I'm going to have him at 3, and since both of you guys already picked your home team player, I'm going to pick my home team player, number 4, Simi Cobbs, the wide receiver for the Indiana Hoosiers. I mean, the dude's got 7 touchdowns on the year so far, 662 receiving yards. Yeah, he's going great. One of the top receivers in the Big Ten. But Simi Cobbs, let's go.
Brady Clay, everybody, the guy who...
I also wrote Wilton Spate on the whiteboard behind
Brady
me.
Clay, everybody, for the guy who in one college football season has put Wilton Spate and Simi Cobbs in his Heisman.
He's the leading receiver in the Big Ten. I'll just put that up.
All right.
Obviously, I following a trend. Not my actual number 4, but having to put Simmie Cobbs up there, you have to.
Well, I think Rojo and Adams are actually
They
Josh
both
and I's
have
number 4, respectively, because they've had
in
unreal
all
years.
honesty, I'm going to stick with the guy in the Indiana school system, but that's going to be Josh Adams. Yeah, my realistic number 4.
Man, I got a lot to live up to now with my number 4 pick. I need to think of which name I'm going to pull out of a hat.
It's got to be Wilkins. It's got to be Manny Wilkins.
But really quick, guys, I think we
Benjamin.
all agree that Baker Mayfield is currently number 1, and I think it's by a good margin because the last few weeks he
About
has
600 yards is what it is.
Yeah, he has been fantastic, and I think it's his to lose at this point. Number 2, I'm going to go with Josh Adams, and mainly because for the Heisman, and I hate that this is kind of the reason, but it seems like the Heisman, it's more so, yeah, it's for the stats, but it also is based off how your team does. And I think Notre Dame finishing really high is really going to help them, which then transitions to number 3, which is Bryce Love. If Stanford had a better record, if they had 1 or 2 losses, I would say Bryce Love was right there at 2 behind. But sitting there at Stanford, they have 3 losses. They do play, I believe, Washington this week. That might be the 4th loss. So already Stanford's going to have 4 losses. Bryce Love, my goodness. I think he's still currently leading the nation in rushing yards by a good amount. But those team losses are going to kill him. And ultimately, I don't think he gets there. But I guess Rashad Penny's now taking him out. But still, Bryce Love, number 2 in the country with 12 touchdowns. I think that's going to hurt. At number 4, I'm going to put Saquon Barkley. He's still having a great season. Now, I know the stats aren't as eye-popping as they are for some other people, but you do have to realize this guy does it all. Not only is he rushing, he's on special teams returning kicks. He's receiving passes. He's doing it all. He's even throwing touchdown passes, but these last 2 weeks, I get that Penn State has lost both the games, but he has been a non-factor in both those games. The Ohio State loss, sure, he had that opening kickoff and he had that 40 or 50-yard touchdown, but other than that guy did not have any plays at all. And then this week against Michigan State, that stat line is atrocious. I'm sounding like Stephen A. Smith right now, but I still think, though, like I said, it's Baker's to lose, but I think this Heisman is as up in the air as it's been in recent years, where we don't have a clear front runner this late in the year. All right, it is time to transition into the Q&A. The Q&A was posted just about 2 hours ago, and we have exactly 100 comments. So, Brady, it's always a tough task for you to find the best comments, but let's get them. Let's try to get about 10 to 15 or so and go through these as quickly as we can and answer some good questions.
What 3 coaches do you guys have right now for your Coach of the Year?
Coach of the Year, I think it's hard not to throw James Franklin out there. I think he's a coach that needs to be noticed. I think you can also throw out Mark Richt. I like what Mark Richt has been doing. In terms of, I want to throw out somebody from the Pac-12, but I just don't think I can.
I mean, I think you have to look at both Mark D'Antonio and Brian Kelly, the way they've turned their programs around from last year to this year. But my clear-cut frontrunner has to be Kirby Smart. I mean, how long has he been at Georgia? Not even 2 years, and all of a sudden they're the number 1 team in the country ahead of Bama. Kirby Smart's my slam dunk pick right now.
Well, you stole my 3, but took them out of order. I had Kirby Smart at number 2. I had D'Antoni at 3, and I actually had Brian Kelly at number 1, just for the crazy turnaround and the heat and fire he was under last season, and to take his team to top 4 this year. Big turnaround. I think he's up there in consideration.
I mean, I always like to try to have different answers than you guys, but like I said, coming into this, I was going to say Brian Kelly right off the bat. The fact that everyone was asking for his head last year, now all of a sudden he's like a savior there. If they beat Georgia, they're the number 1 ranked team in the country right now, which is insane, but that's who mine's got to be. But we all mentioned some good names, but I think Brian Kelly currently number 1.
Is Will Grier the most overlooked quarterback in college football?
Nope.
I still think he doesn't get the attention he deserves. Like we've said about what it feels like a million times now on this show, he was 6-0 before he got suspended at Florida, and now he's really making up for lost time at West Virginia. I know they're not in the top 25, but what Greer's done has been pretty remarkable.
I feel he's not the most overlooked because I feel like every week we're mentioning how underrated he is, but I think for overlooked, I'm just going to throw out Khalil Tate's name.
Well, I saw somewhere today that ESPN had him like number 4 or 5 in the Heisman rankings. I think people are starting to notice him.
It's because of the Pac-12 After Dark thing. He doesn't get enough publicity.
Very true.
What has been the best game so far this season?
I got to go with Ohio State, Penn State.
I think I'm going to say Ohio State, Penn State, but I think there's been some other really good ones too. Like I wouldn't even put it past USC, Texas.
I'm going to stray away from that. I'm going to go the Oklahoma State game from this past week.
Yeah, that's fair.
Over 100 points combined.
Yeah.
Shootout. It's not a Oh, Oklahoma State joke.
I forget who it is. Who played in that 7 overtime game a few weeks ago? Who was that? I think it was...
Oh, wait. Before we get there, the Boise State-Washington State game, too. That was another really good one.
The massive comeback there.
Yeah.
That
Western
was
Michigan, Buffalo.
Western Michigan, Buffalo. I mean, it's not between two great teams, but 7 overtimes. Talk about a thriller. It was a 71-68 game, and that was the highest scoring college football game in history.
Very short question. Is Darnold back?
Yeah, I think so. I never counted him. I never counted him out. But the big thing that continues to stand out to me is how do you have the ball inside the 5, roll to your right, and throw it into double coverage, and it's an interception in the back of the end zone. That's the thing that continues to stand out to me, and I don't understand how you make mistakes like that. But yes, I do think he's back.
Just ask the Texas quarterback from 2 weeks ago.
I mean, I'm not going to lie, I had my doubts after the couple games he had against Notre Dame, against even a team like Texas, but after these last 2 weeks against ASU and then against U of A, he looks back to his old form.
I don't think he's back 100%, but I think he's one game away from being there. And I'm just going based off of what I saw at the end of last season. He's not the same Darnold, but he's much better than he was at the beginning of the year.
What major structural improvements does college football need to make over the next couple of years?
Expand the playoff.
6 teams.
6. I want 8.
I want 8 teams.
Well, my dream scenario was like at least 16, but let me not get ahead of myself there. But make it 8.
Full 64 March Madness style bracket.
That's what I've been saying.
That's different, though.
Arizona State would have a shot.
But the March Madness is basketball. You know how many hits these guys take from football? It takes a different type of toll on your body. They couldn't do a round of 64.
I've said it before. I'll say it again. I think it should be 6. I think 1 and 2 are there's no, okay, let's randomly throw up Notre Dame at number 1. Now I'm just throwing out a team. It's not like a team's been holding down the number 4 spot for weeks and then says, all right, well, we're going to put them at number 1 this week because, hey, power rankings. But I think you simply have to give it to the most deserving 2 teams in college football. They both get buys for the first one, and then you can kind of play it the rest like that, like our fantasy league.
I was about to say that. It's similar to our 6-team fantasy league.
Yeah, I said that.
I got a question really quick, and it's not on Brady's list, but I just love this question so much. How absolutely terrible are the Florida Gators?
Oh my God, they're awful.
Hey,
At one point this season, I thought they could have one of the best secondaries in the country. At one point, and that was within the first 2 weeks.
hey, now they've finally made the right decision at quarterback. They've put Malik Zaire under center, and they're just going to, maybe they'll win a couple games now.
Didn't he lose his first start last week?
Yeah, he did. It was like 44-9.
Yeah. Who has the best defense in the country?
Georgia.
I'm going to say, ooh, that's tough. I'm going to say Georgia as well. I think you could throw in Alabama as well.
I was going to say Alabama.
Not with all those injuries.
Yeah, but they have a lot of injuries, and especially with Fitzpatrick out, I think I'll stick SEC and go with Georgia.
But Lyle, you've said this in the show, and you've said this a lot. It's like they're a bunch of 2-star recruits on the bench at Alabama. There are 5-star guys who could be starting anywhere else as a true freshman, sitting on the bench writing it out. So you got to throw those guys in. They're going to make an impact. I'm going to say Alabama.
They'll make an impact, but they're not Sean Dion Hamilton or Minka Fitzpatrick.
That's true.
Well, according to statistics via ESPN, the best defense in the country when it comes to fewest yards per game is Washington. How about that? Alabama's their number 2. Michigan there at 3, Georgia at 4, and Wisconsin at 5. Hey, San Diego State there at 8.
Look at number 9, Blake.
It's probably because they're all the way back in the end zone after those nice punts.
Hey, I mean, Washington does have a few first-rounders on that defense, so I'm not shocked. It's just if the offense can't really hold the fort for them.
You're an NFL GM, and you had to take one of these quarterbacks in the first round. Who do you take? Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, Mason Rudolph, or Lamar Jackson?
Lamar Jackson.
Definitely Lamar.
That's a tough one. I guess if all these guys are confirmed coming, I like Darnold. I think potential-wise he has the most, but I'm going to stick with Sam Darnold. I think Lamar Jackson is going to be a good quarterback, definitely better than Mayfield and Rudolph, but I'm going to ride with Darnold just because I think he has more upside.
It's pretty crazy how quickly Josh Rosen was phased out of these
The injuries
conversations
didn't
on
help.
our sh- And but even earlier on in the season when he was still up in the top 5 in passing statistics. He kind of got phased out of not only our conversations, but the questions involving quarterbacks. It's been Darnold, even though he was struggling, and then Rudolph, Mayfield, and Jackson.
I still can't really imagine the roller coaster that Sam Darnold's gone through this season.
Oh.
First round pick, number 1 overall pick. Oh my God, he's going to stay another year. He might leave, but he's going to come back. There's just too much going on for Sam Darnold. Currently at this moment this year, I'm saying Baker Mayfield pretty much only because of this last game. He dropped 600 yards.
Yeah, but a Big 12 defense is a little different than the Pittsburgh Steelers if you were to say go to the Browns at number 1.
Yeah,
So you think Lamar Jackson could handle that Steelers defense?
I do. I
Really?
think just the fact he's a better pocket passer than people give him credit for, and then of
He
course
has
the
the
ability
ability
to
to
run.
run.
And I think in this class, he has the best arm. He can sling
do
that
too.
ball.
Did you guys hear Baker Mayfield's quote this past week? I love it. He goes, "If I were on another team, I'd hate me too." Like, oh, I love it.
Really quickly, stand on Baker Mayfield. One of the comments I did notice as well was, should the Saints draft Baker Mayfield? And I know that's kind of far-fetched, but I was looking at some mock drafts, and a lot of them have the Saints taking Baker Mayfield in the first round. I would be 100% okay with that as a New Orleans Saints fan, who, by the way, are going to go to the Super Bowl this year and win it. If you can draft Baker Mayfield,
Go Rams.
develop him for about 2 or 3 years until Drew Brees retires, I absolutely am 100% behind that. That does wrap up this Q&A. Some very good questions. Hey, every week we got some good questions. But I was scrolling through them, and a lot of those questions were all about Baker Mayfield, about the polls. So I guess everyone wants to see the same thing. But really quickly, ASU, looking at the rankings, 37th right now in the country, behind Florida Atlantic. Lane Kiffin, you're doing somewhat of a decent job over there. Who would have thought? But guys, going into the pick'ems right now, as we always do, we do have our little Pick'em fantasy group. I don't know if you guys are even active in there anymore at this point. It's safe to say. Well, Josh might be, but Brady and Lyle, you guys are far gone. It's safe to assume.
I actually made picks the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, very nice, very nice. Currently in the lead, once again, is Agent Killa Deluxe with 76 points. He has a 2-point lead over the next closest guy, so slowly, Agent Killa Deluxe, if you're out there, you're slowly gaining the lead, so apparently this is yours to lose. Keep it up. But guys, as always, we do have our own Pick'em rankings. Now, there was a point when I was starting these Pick'ems, I was within 3 of Lyle, and then chaos started to ensue. All my picks started going wrong, and well, it's safe to say my attempt, dilly has fallen, but I do have 59 points, which is impressive, but not as impressive as Lyle, who now has 66 points. Brady, you are now in second place with 68 points. Josh, you are currently in the lead now with a nice 69 points. Well done. Very nice,
You started
Josh.
off with Lyle, and then I was like, wait, we're going
was
up.
so
I think you have
confused.
the order.
Now, I will admit, I did say, oh my goodness, there's no good games this week, but I was wrong. Next week is the week that doesn't have that many good games, but this week, oh my goodness. We have 3 top 10 matchups. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 top 25 matchups. It's going to be a good week, boys. Let's get these pick'ems underway. We're going to start off with a fairly, whatever game. Number 9, Washington at Stanford.
Washington's the better team. I think Stanford puts up a solid fight through 4 quarters, but they can't get it done.
I think Bryce Love's held to his lowest rushing total of the year going up against Washington, who, as Blake mentioned, is the number 1 defense in the country. Because of that, I think the Huskies get the win.
I think Bryce Love will still have a good game, but I don't think the rest of the offense for Stanford will be able to hold up with the defense. I'm going Washington.
I'm going Washington. Number 12, Michigan State. At number 13, Ohio State.
Ohio State's the better team. It just depends on whether or not they decide not to sleep through the opening kickoff. I don't think they do this week. I think Michigan State is knocked down a peg. I still think they're a good team, and I commend them for everything they've done to turn their program around since last season. And I still think that they're a good team, but I just think Ohio State is, without a doubt, I think, the best competition they've faced this year. And I think the Buckeyes figure out a way to get the win at home in Columbus.
Urban Meyer is not going to let his team lose 2 straight games, especially not at the Horseshoe for this one. I'm going Ohio State.
Columbus and the Horseshoe is one of the toughest places to play in the country, no matter what time of day. And it's starting to get cold out there in Columbus, so I'm going to go with Ohio State beating Michigan State at home.
Early in the year, I made my prediction that Ohio State can have anywhere from 3 to 5 losses, and I was laughed at. Well, if they don't get that 1-point victory over Penn State, This team has 3 losses on the year with the potential 4 to come this week. It's not going to be their 4th, but they are going to get their 3rd loss of the year, and that is Michigan State going in there and getting the win. Number 15, Oklahoma State at number 21, Iowa State.
I'm going to keep it short and sweet. I think Mason Rudolph and the Cowboys win in an absolute blowout.
Cowboys definitely get the win. I'm going to say by 3 touchdowns.
I'm going Oklahoma State as well.
Sorry, Iowa State. I was having your back last week. You let me down. I'm going Oklahoma State big. Number 1, Georgia at number 10, Auburn.
This is going to be a really fun game. Not my favorite game of the week. I will say that as a disclaimer, but this one definitely one of the top 2 or 3 games of the week. I think Georgia wins. This is going to be a very low-scoring affair. I think Georgia wins by 6.
I think we're going to see how dominant Georgia really is. I'm not sold on Auburn. They do have 2 losses on the year. I like the Bulldogs.
I like the Bulldogs as well. Jake Fromm, killer quarterback, killer name, killer Twitter name. I'm going to go with the Bulldogs.
I do think Auburn being the 10 is a little high. They wanted to make this game, a top 10 matchup of both teams. It is a Jordan-Hare, which, as we've seen, miracles have happened there. Kind of rhymed a little right there. Oh my goodness. Anyway, guys, I think what Josh said is spot on. It's going to be a very close game. Part of me really wants to pick Auburn, but then a part of me really wants to pick Georgia. I am going to go with Georgia, but if any of these games that we have this week are going to be an upset, it's going to be Auburn, because, as we've seen, they're no stranger to the upset at Jordan-Hare. Florida State at Clemson. Coming into the year, this was probably going to be the marquee ACC game of the year. Unfortunately, it's not anymore.
I think this one is a completely lopsided game. I don't see Florida State staying in this game for more than 2 quarters. I think they do stay in for 2 quarters, but halftime is going to be a huge difference maker for Clemson. I think they turn it around in the second half, and I think they win by 3 scores.
Clemson wins big.
Clemson.
Yeah, I'm going with the Tigers in this one. Number 20, Iowa at number 8, Wisconsin.
See, Blake, this is where I disagree with you about the Georgia-Auburn game. We've seen the miracle at Jordan-Hare before when Auburn was able to outlast Georgia on that last play. I think this is the biggest upset of the week if it happens. I think Iowa has the chance to go in and beat a very underwhelming Wisconsin team that somehow is still 8-0. Are they 8-0? Yes, or no, they're 9-0. They're undefeated. And by underwhelming and by a team that's surprisingly 9-0, I don't mean surprisingly because their schedule is basically nothing. They haven't played any marquee teams, and they won't. This, I think, is their toughest home game of the season. And coming into this pick, I wanted to take Iowa, but I'm going to take the Badgers by a field goal at home.
Well, I'll say this much. I'm not going to be catching Josh in the pick'ems anytime soon, considering we have all the same games, all the same teams winning. But I previewed it earlier. I think Iowa gets it done. I think they're going to expose Wisconsin. I'm taking the Hawkeyes.
I'm taking the Hawkeyes as well. I think they're going to get a marquee road win, and like I said earlier, propel themselves to in the talks of top team in the Big Ten.
I'm looking at Iowa's schedule, and they've had some heartbreaking losses. An overtime loss to Northwestern, who is currently in the top 25, a loss by 7 at Michigan State, and then that 2-point loss against Penn State, which came as time expired. So they've had some heartbreakers this year. I am going to go with Wisconsin because I am going to back up earlier in the year what I said when I said Wisconsin was going to go undefeated. So I just got to ride with the Badgers. But Iowa, as Josh mentioned, if there's going to be any upset as well that I think is maybe that has the best chance, I can say, like most likely, if you want to consider it an upset, because I'm sure a lot of people can say Iowa's a better team than Wisconsin, I think it might be this one. I'm going to take the Badgers, but I think Iowa wins this game. Number 2, Alabama at number 16, Mississippi State. Mississippi
State doesn't have it. I mentioned it last week. I was absolutely shocked that they were ahead of a few of the teams that they were ahead of. And I don't think they're a very good team. We've seen who they've lost to. We've seen who they've struggled to beat. I think Alabama wins big.
I know Bama has some injuries on defense, but like Josh just said, I think they're a very, very overrated team. Crimson Tide wins big.
This is Alabama's first ranked game since the first game of the year, and I think it's going to put a better light on them, and maybe another reason why they should be bumped up to number 1 in the college football playoff rankings. I'm going to have the Tide with a huge victory, at least 3 touchdowns.
Alabama, no question. Number 3, Notre Dame at number 7, Miami. The Catholics versus the Convicts, and College game day this week. Guys, who wins this one?
Catholics versus convicts. You said it yourself. Best game of the week, as BK just said himself. Lyle and I have had picks that were very similar. And I don't really see how we're going to start differentiating our pick'em. So it looks like I'm going to probably stay ahead by 1 this week because I'm guessing Lyle and I are going to keep picking the same teams. However, this game is in Florida. Miami's coming off of a very huge win. Notre Dame, still the number 3 team in the country, still the number 3 team in the playoff polls. But did underperform slightly against Wake Forest. They didn't deserve to drop. I just wanted to mix things up in my poll. And this is going to be a great game. I think the Canes stay undefeated. I think Miami wins this game at home. Notre Dame is going to suffer their second and final loss of the season this week against Miami.
Miami's coming off a very, very impressive win against Virginia Tech, like we touched on earlier. But like I said, that Syracuse win against Clemson all the way back a few weeks ago, I think that was a fluke because Syracuse is now 4-5, and Miami beat them. Of course, the 5-point win against 1-8 UNC. Like I said, they've had some dud wins this year. If they beat Notre Dame, I will be thoroughly impressed, and I will be all in on the Hurricanes. However, I don't think it happens. I'm taking the Irish. I don't want to see that turnover chain one time.
You know, I think playing in Miami is a very tough place to play. And it's perfect conditions. It's going to be 80 degrees. It's going to be sunny. It's Miami weather for you. But my thing is, I think Miami will get the win this week on a final drive or on a turnover by Notre Dame.
Miami by 1.
I'm going to go Miami by less than a touchdown. I don't have an exact number, but less than a touchdown.
Yeah.
And I think this loss, like I talked about earlier with Penn State, Notre Dame will bring their clutch factor, but it won't prevail through. I still think they'll be in the top 10 in the rankings, maybe even top 7. But if they get one loss and it's very close to a team that's number 7, I don't think Notre Dame will fall very far in the rankings.
Yeah.
Depending on how they play and how close the game is.
I already made my pick. You guys know what it is, and I try to stay away from score predictions when I make my predictions. But I'll tell you guys right now, in our ESPN Pick'ems, the Harris Highlights group on ESPN.com, I picked Miami by 1, 31-30.
Wow, I did not see that coming. I'm going to go with Notre Dame in this one, just because I'm still not impressed with Miami. Number 6 TCU at number 5 Oklahoma.
See, I was very high on TCU throughout the course of the season. BK was making great arguments for them, and I was buying in, and I still think they're a good team. I think they suffer their second and, again, final loss of the season this week, similar to Notre Dame. I think it's hard to pick against Baker Mayfield right now. I do think that this Oklahoma team does have a lot of shortcomings, but not this week. They get the win at home over the Horned Frogs.
You know what? I'm not sold on that Oklahoma defense like I've touched on, and TCU is the one team in the Big 12 with a solid defense. BK, this one's for you, buddy. I'm going with the Horned Frogs.
I'm going with the Horned Frogs, too, because yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay.
Because why not?
There it is.
I like the Sooners in this one. I think Baker Mayfield is going to continue his Heisman campaign and take down the Frogs. Brady, you know I like the Horned Frogs. I'm pulling for them just for that one pick you made, but I got to go with who's going to win, and that's going to be Oklahoma, bud. And guys, that does bring us to the worst of the worst, and that features San Jose State at Nevada.
To this day, I will always say that the post-game little article that I wrote about Nevada upsetting Boise State was one of the best articles I've ever written, and it was Colin Kaepernick himself who was their quarterback. And for that reason, I am taking the Nevada Wolfpack over the San Jose State Spartans.
Usually I like to go into the preparation I've done, but I'm going to go a little prediction on you guys. 2 things are going to happen before our next show. Nevada gets a win, and Colin Kaepernick gets signed by an NFL team. 2 things that are very worthy of happening. I think Nevada's the better team in this game, and the fact that Colin Kaepernick doesn't have a job in the NFL is beyond ridiculous at this point. Both happen before the next show. You heard it here first.
I was thinking that the entire time, thinking someone could bring in Kaepernick involved in this, but both of you did. So I'm going to go with a different avenue. You look at these 2 teams. San Jose State, their mascot is what, Josh?
The Spartans.
And Nevada is what?
The Wolfpack.
Which one doesn't end in S?
Wolfpack.
every week we've had a team that doesn't end in S with their mascot. I've picked them. I'm going Nevada again this week. Go Wolfpack. No S.
I always base my worst of the worst picks on just completely something I pull out of my hat seconds before making the pick. When I went to Las Vegas, I lost about $250. Yeah, I know. Surprisingly, that's only it. And Las Vegas is in Nevada. Just for that very reason, I'm going to go with San Jose State. I don't like associating losing with anything. And when I see Nevada, I think of losing. And when I think of losing, I think of whoever they're playing is winning. And they're playing San Jose State this week, which means they're going to win. Which does bring us to the final game of the week, and that is Arizona State at UCLA. A nice 7:30 kickoff from the Rose Bowl. I'm sure there'll be a nice 10,000 or so fans in attendance, as always, for these UCLA games. Guys, it does look like Josh Rosen is not going to play. Who do you think is going to win?
Well, I referenced the win percentage that ESPN had earlier for a game that I cannot remember anymore. But I'm looking at this prediction for ASU and UCLA, and ESPN.com currently has UCLA a 62.3 win percentage. And I will tell you right now, I think that's absolute garbage. I think that this UCLA team is not good. I think ASU, despite their loss to USC, has been one of the better teams in the Pac-12 the last 4 or 5 weeks. I think ASU goes into the Rose Bowl and wins by 3 touchdowns. And hopefully, we are there to see it.
Yep.
Pending approval.
Well, a tweet came out today. Jim Morris says Josh Rosen practiced today. If things progress as they appear to be the rest of the week, then he should be available for ASU. So Rosen does have a chance to play. It was tweeted by Ashley Adamson. She's I think she writes for the Pac-12 Network or works with the Pac-12 Network or something along those lines.
She's their anchor. She was actually here 2 weeks ago.
So she was at Media Day today for UCLA. She tweeted that out. If Rosen plays, I think the Bruins have a little bit more of a chance. However, I think the Sun Devils are the better team. I know UCLA's at home, but is home field advantage really a thing for UCLA?
No, it is not.
So I'm going to go with the Sun Devils.
Yes, it is. They're 4-0 at home this year. All 4 of their wins are at home this year for UCLA.
And all 10,000 of their fans have been going crazy.
Well,
I'm not saying it's a home field advantage, but I'm a big fan of stats and numbers, and UCLA has not lost at home this year. But I think after this week, they will have 1 loss at home. I'm going with the Sun Devils.
Oh, I think I love stats too, but I don't think their 4 wins at home have anything to do with their fans.
This is just sad. I think Arizona State is going to, after the game, head on down to the nearest bowling alley and go bowling. Because they'll be picking up their 6th win of the season and be bowl eligible for our first time here, guys. I'm excited. Is it going to be the Cactus Bowl, the Vegas Bowl? The Kraft Fight Hunger Bowl? That's still a bowl?
I was really hoping that both IU and ASU would go like 6-6 and meet in the Foster Farms Bowl, and I don't know who I'd root for, but that'd be really fun. But IU's like 3-6 right now, so it's not gonna happen.
Listen, guys, here's the thing: if Arizona State figures out a way to go to the Holiday Bowl in San Diego, or if they figure out a way to stay here in the Valley of the Sun and go to the Cactus Bowl, the Harris Highlights show's mobbing. Can I confirm that? No?
You can add a third one. Vegas. I'm there.
I don't know if they'll go to Vegas, but if they go to one of those three, I will do my best to go.
I'm down to go anywhere except for, El Paso for the Sun Bowl?
Yeah.
Or anywhere. Detroit for the whatever.
Oh, we don't go there.
The Little Caesars
It's the
Bowl.
Alamo Bowl. They go to the Alamo Bowl for San Antonio. That's one of the ones they go to.
And that's
the host of the
SC's
Final
predicted
Four
to go
next
there.
season.
I'll pass on going to San Antonio. Been there, great city, but I'm not going to go back.
Bring back the Evergreen Bowl to Seattle.
Real quick, is there another bowl game in Arizona besides the Fiesta Bowl?
Yeah,
The Arizona Bowl in Tucson,
Is
which
it?
I don't know why anyone would want to go to that.
Well, that does wrap up this week's show, guys. Christmas is officially next month. Sorry, Brady. If you're interested in owning some Harris Highlights merch, today is your lucky day. Pick up your own Don't Sleep on Chattanooga, Zane for Heisman, and official Harris Highlights merch, guys. Zane was at the game the other day, and I sadly wasn't wearing my Zane for Heisman shirt.
You did yell at him, though.
Did you guys see him?
I did yell
Yes,
at him.
we
I
did.
screamed at him. I almost pulled what's his name from Blades of Glory, where he hops over the bleachers and goes after Jimmy McElroy. Almost saw that happen right there, but it didn't. But get your merchandise, because before you know it, it's going to be too late, and you're not going to get that awesome present under the tree from Santa. Santa knows if you're naughty, you're nice, and if you're nice, you're going to get some Harris Highlights merch under that tree.
They should change it to Santa knows if you're a Harris Highlight subscriber or not.
That should be how it is. Also, guys, this episode was brought to you by FanDuel. Head over to FanDuel, use the promo code SCORE2, and you'll get a free entry into the NFL Sunday $1 Million Contest, but you got to make a deposit. Also, another little sponsor right there is SeatGeek. Head over to SeatGeek.com, enter the promo code Harris Highlights, that is one word, and you'll get $20 off your very first order.
I think we were using SeatGeek to get the tickets for this weekend's game.
I think we might be.
If we even go.
Oh, anyway, I know Lyle is currently on watch in hopes of getting some Seahawks-Cardinals tickets for this Thursday's game in Glendale, Arizona.
I am.
So, Lyle, just know that whatever the price is, well, you can take $20 off of that. Yo, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you like Harris Highlights on Facebook. Follow us all on Twitter. I mean, we got to get those Twitter followers up. We are very interactive there. Listen to the show on SoundCloud. Give this video a thumbs up. For Lyle Goldstein, Josh Schaefer, and Brady Klein, this has been Blake Harris. Coming to you from downtown Phoenix at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications. Guys, a great week of college football this week. Be on the lookout for us. If you're going to game day in Miami, make sure you make a sign, send it our way, and we'll see you guys next week.